You mentioned May 9th, and I completely agree. I think uh, it's May 9th is often leveraged by obviously the military establishment as well as those who oppose Imran Khan as the crux and the downfall of that regime. But the truth is that we often tend to not talk about the underlying factors that led to May 9th happening. There's this level of distrust in the institutions of the country. There's this economic turmoil that people had been grappling with, that there was so much frustration that led to those various factors culminating into the events of May 9th. And what we were hoping for is that these elections would help bridge those gaps, would help heal the country, and then move forward to a more positive trajectory and towards an upward outlook. Anyhow, that really did not happen. And then you also mentioned the RTS, and you talked about the ECP's mismanagement. And I want to second that. Whether that's lack of technical ability, whether this is mismanagement, or there's deliberately maneuvering of the elections, in any case, it tends to lose the credibility that elections govern and the elections are meant to hold. And that's what we've been seeing, that there's a lot of hostility now that's been growing even further among the masses who feel that their mandate has been stolen. But despite all that, one question I wanted to put forth for you is that we knew that the elections were skewed in favor, or the environment was being created in such a manner that implicitly favored one party. And then the results that we see, despite all that, are you surprised by those results that, the independents backed by PTI, who uh, who fought the elections without the party leadership, without a central board, without its electoral symbol, despite all that, they were able to gain so many seats. How did you view that result?
February 8th, the elections took place. February 9th, around the afternoon, I tweeted. This was my first tweet after the elections. It has started by saying, not surprised at all with what was happening. I mean, obviously, the results were still coming in. And at that point in time, PTI-backed independents were leading in KP. Obviously, they were sweeping KP. They were leading in Punjab, and they were leading in the National Assembly. So not surprised at all. I thought that everyone agreed that they had the support. The only question was whether they can convert that support into votes. And I think we have to give them the credit that they were always known as a party which was strongest in the social media. And they used that social media to their advantage in a manner that they reached even those segments of the population which are not so educated. I mean, Pakistan's electoral process obviously is urban centers, and then you have rural centers, and it's obviously very, very difficult to expect that they would go through the social media to comprehend, because don't forget that PTI-backed candidates had the same symbol, bat, with which everyone was familiar for years. And suddenly that was taken. So every candidate was going into with a new, with a different symbol, and that symbol obviously meant that this would be difficult for those candidates, so those voters, to go and identify on the ballot paper to pick up the right choice. And I think they did so. From that standpoint, they had the support. I never thought, I had no doubt about that. In Pakistan, the point is that any party or any political leader which is considered to be on the receiving end, which has been the case all through our history, is suddenly becomes the most popular leader, starting with Mujibur Rahman before the breakup of Pakistan, to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and then to Benazir Bhutto, and then to Nawaz Sharif, not one, not twice, but 3 times he was ousted by the military-backed, whatever. I mean, sometimes the judiciary was used, sometimes direct military intervention, and the first time the Kakar formula. And each time he was able to come back stronger than ever, simply because he was considered to be the one who had been undone and therefore needed the backing of the people. This time it was Imran Khan's. Basically, the thing went in favor of Imran Khan. Not to give them the credit for the fight back. Obviously, it was not just about that they were believed that they have been on the receiving end and this is the only way. By the way, you mentioned May 9th. This was the only way to come over and put the May 9th behind them. And the way they have done, and certainly on the mainstream television networks, you see the PTI leaders and some of the anchors, talk show hosts who are supportive of PTI, certainly becoming more stronger in their views and talking things without fearing a backlash from anyone.
Actually, no, absolutely. I cannot agree more. Very valid point. And especially you took us back to 1971 and you shared the analogy, comparing Mujibur Rahman and the events that followed. There was military intervention back then as well. There's one key similarity that was one incident in Pakistan's history back then when a party which had the majority of votes was unable to form a government. And now in 2024, we also see something similar. It's not the same intensity, but we see that a party which had the maximum number of seats among the top three is being unable to form a government, and PMLN, which has the second largest seats, and People's Party, which has the third largest seats, are forming sort of a coalition to form a minority government. And we've barely witnessed that happen, other than the events of 1971.
Yeah, but just one correction here. Just one correction here as far as PTI being unable to form the government. I mean, some of it is obviously also to do with the PTI's political decision making. I mean, they have said that they will not ask PPP or PMLN, or they will not even talk to them. So if they don't talk to them, and based on the current numbers, I mean, they can become better. I mean, they can even have a simple majority on their own. That would be a different case. Today, if you ask them, they are reaching out to smaller parties. They have reached out yesterday to JUIF, which has just about 3 or 4 seats in the National Assembly, which is not enough to give them the strength for the simple majority. So, I mean, that is the difference. The Awami League of Mujibur Rahman obviously had a simple majority on their own, although all of those seats had come from East Pakistan. And the sensitivity, I'm not saying that today we do not have the kind of sensitivity, but then the sensitivity was about the integrity of the country, that if you don't let Awami League or Mujibur Rahman and you don't give them the power, I mean, you could, obviously everyone thought that you would lead this up to the breakup of the country. That's exactly what happened.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And of course, there were other multiple factors. There were marginalization. They weren't given their due share. The economic allocation of resources was not fair or partial at all back then. But, and I agree with the simple majority part as well. But what I wanted to focus was that the parties that are now forming the government, they do not have the majority mandate. Obviously, it's not, the PTI does not have simple majority, but still, in terms of who has the highest number of seats and who has, the second highest and the third highest in terms of that. What it begs is the important question that for such a government, a coalition government, coalitions tend to work better when there's an overlap of manifesto or objectives. Now, People's Party is more akin to being a socialist party. Their manifestos, their objectives, their goals tend to be different than those of PMLN, which focuses more on business-oriented communities, trading activities. There's a difference in their economic output and how they tend to perceive things. So the very first question would be, do you think such a coalition is possible or sustainable in the long term? That's one. The second question that I wanted to ask is closely related, is that the IMF program, the 3 billion program, is coming to an end. We would most likely be going into another IMF program. We'll be going for another additional loan of maybe $6 to $8 billion. Our foreign reserves, again, they've started to dwindle. They're down to $8 billion, which covers only 1 month of import cover. And in doing so, some tough and key decisions need to be made, including raising the prices of commodities, of basic utilities, fuel, petrol, energy. And in doing so, whichever party is at the helm of affairs risks losing the support of the masses. And in this case, they already do not have the support of the masses. So political stability tends to drive or convert into economic stability. And here we're already initiating on a very turbulent ground. What are the challenges of the vision?
How the challenges could not have been tougher ever in terms of economic challenges. You obviously mentioned Pakistan has to go into a new IMF program because the current one ends in March. And obviously, whichever party forms the government ultimately has to start negotiating with IMF from the first day onwards for a bigger, longer. This one was 9 months. So obviously, we are not talking about 9 months. We are talking about 3 years or something like that. And maybe 6-8 billion, or someone is also talking about $10-12 billion to give them the safety network so that they can then focus on other things.